Hello everyone, Andrew here, and welcome to the conclusion to the NES ranking video for the letter B, NES games starting with the letter B. Here in front of me we have the approximately 30 games that we looked at in the previous part, and today we're going to be looking at another 31 games that start with the letter B because there are just so many of them on the NES, and what better B game to get started with than B52, the first Codemasters Comerica game that I hit in the NES library with one of those funky gold, or in this case silver. I'm not sure how they decided which one they were gonna color each cart, but they decided to go with silver for B52. It's a pretty simple game. You fly around as a bee with the idea of finding flowers of which you can take their nectar, take it back to your hive, and turn it into honey to the point where you fill up a jar located on the bottom right corner of the screen. Fill that up and you're moving on to the next level, but the caveat comes that you can only take the nectar from up to 3 flowers at a time before having to then go back to the hive, drop that off, and then back out into the level to find more. The unfortunate part of this is that it means you're replaying a lot of the level, and enemies respawn each time you leave the screen and come back. So it's not like you can just clear the level of enemies and then it's smooth sailing. No, you're constantly fighting the same enemies through the same parts of the level over and over again, and it's tedious by the end when you're pretty much required to make about 5 trips to actually fill up that jar, where in the earlier levels it's a little bit simpler. There are power-ups though to help you along the way, things that upgrade your shooting ability, things that make you stronger, things that protect you from damage, because normally it's a one-hit kill, but otherwise it's a pretty fun game. And if you've ever wanted to know what it's like to be a bee in 8-bit form, this one is there for you. But yeah, B52, not too bad, and again, for the first Comerica game that I hit, it was pretty good. One thing I wasn't too big of a fan of was that there's no music during the levels, and in other Codemasters games I've played, the music is one of the highlights. They were actually pretty good at making some awesome NES music, but for whatever reason, B52, while you're flying through those levels, playing those same parts over and over again, they just gave you nothing to listen to. But for the gameplay, for the visuals, and just overall for being pretty fun, I'm gonna give it a B because it seems like it'd be unfitting to give it any other letter. But yeah, not a bad game, and check it out if you get the chance. Continuing on with the B's, it's Beetlejuice. Now, this was a movie I was never too into, but I'm always happy to judge the game independently, so that's exactly what I did in this situation here. And you'd be surprised to know this is a game actually made by Rare before they were in their glory Super Nintendo and N64 days. This was one of the games that they made. We've looked at A Nightmare on Elm Street previously, and that was actually pretty fun, pretty innovative. Beetlejuice, on the other end, unfortunately hits the mark in several ways. It's not a very nice game to look at. Everything's always flickering. The level design is pretty bad. One of the biggest problems is the screen scrolls up along with you. However, if you fall down to even where there's floor, if you don't gradually scroll the screen back down, and you go down to where there's floor but it doesn't show on screen, you die. It acts as if you fell into a bottomless pit, so that's pretty poorly programmed. A lot of the game revolves around these masks, which you have to buy, and one of the main ways you're going to get currency for buying these masks is just stomping on bugs that pop out of these holes. Sure, you can also go into the holes, maybe fight like a bit of a mini boss to try and get a few points that way, but the amount that you get is so few, and the danger that comes from fighting these mini bosses is so high that you might as well just mash that B button and constantly stomp the bugs to farm for these masks, because you really do need them. They are the only way to attack, and bosses require that you attack them in order to defeat them. And if you end up in a boss room and have no masks left to fight them, it boots you back to pretty much the beginning of the level, forcing you to play through it again, this time making sure you have the masks to fight it. So that's a pretty shoddy system, and overall, just again, level design kind of lacks. It's not that fun. The coolest thing is that level 3 is actually a top-down exploration level, which you would have no idea that even existed unless you put some actual effort into getting deeper into this game, which I don't know why you probably would, considering the first 2 levels aren't that great. But if you get to that, that's pretty fun, and the music there is pretty good. Overall, the music's probably one place where this game kind of stands out. The soundtrack was actually done by David Wise, who you may know better for the Donkey Kong Country game, so there is that. But otherwise, Beetlejuice, unfortunately, not that memorable of an NES game, and definitely more of a slog, and there's lots of things they could have fixed here. So I hate to do it, especially since, there are those exploration parts, and the music's not that bad, but I just have no desire to go back and play Beetlejuice again. So it gets a D, but again, if you feel differently about that, feel free to tell me why you love Beetlejuice down in the comments below. Best of the Best Karate. This one was on various consoles, Super Nintendo, Game Boy. I have to give it credit for trying to kind of be like a realistic fighter, like a realistic kickboxing, realistic karate. It looks pretty cool. Graphically, it's not a bad game. Unfortunately, it's incredibly broken. One of the things that you can do in this game is just go to the training mode and beef up your stats as much as you want. So if you want a really massive advantage to play through all the different matches you have to do to become the world champ, then you can do that right off the bat. And also one thing this game does is it allows you to customize your attacks. So there are different sets of attacks you get to choose from. Then going into the match, you can then obviously use those different attacks on your opponent. I found that max out your stats as soon as you can, choose option 3, and then just hold up on the controller, which will cause your character to constantly jump kick forward, and you can defeat 99% of the enemies in this game by just holding up on the D-pad. So it's a very broken game, but you know, maybe you don't want to be that cheap. Maybe you want to play it more legit than that. It's a cool game. Like, it's not the worst game out there. If you're looking for a more realistic fighting game, but otherwise, Best of the Best Karate, not the best of the best NES games by a long shot. But I had some fun with it, maybe just because a lot of my playing consisted of holding the up button and seeing myself win. Like, you know, how many times do you have to do that in an NES game? Usually there's a lot more work involved. This one, it's like is it a C or a D? Once again, it's gonna be one of those kinds of days after, you know, we had so many nice A and B games in the last part. Oh, Best of the Best Karate. It could be a little bit better, but it's fun, but like fun enough, not fun enough. I'm gonna go back and play it any day soon. So fortunately, it gets a D from me. Speaking of the letter D, it's gonna be one of those days, isn't it? Bible Adventures. Well, you know what? This game gets a bad rap. You get Noah's Ark, Baby Moses, David and Goliath. How can you complain about 3 games in one? And you know, Noah's Ark is pretty funny. Did you even know that Noah's Ark has like 4 levels, each one having different animals that you're required to collect for getting to the Ark? I bet you didn't. So there you go. You're hating on Noah's Ark and you don't even know anything about it. Nah, this game's pretty shoddy. Of course, the best part always being when you can run faster than the screen can scroll, seeing Noah pile up all those animals. Just, it's absolutely absurd, but there's kind of a charm to it, I gotta admit. And Baby Moses, this game always reminds me of like Super Mario Brothers 2, the desert levels from Mario 2, jumping through the clouds. It really does kind of give off that vibe. And then David and Goliath, you know, picking up the sheep. It's a lot like it's kind of like a combo of Noah's Ark and the Baby Moses game. I don't know, I kind of have a soft spot for Bible Adventures, but I can also acknowledge it's a very broken game. But for unlicensed, it's like, we'll put it there. I'm hoping we get to something a little better soon, although looking at what we've got coming up, you know, B has some of like the worst NES games and also some of like the best ones as well. Again, it's like over 60 games. It's gonna have that spread, so stay tuned for some actual decent games. Bible Buffet! I mean, it's like, you know, can we get out of the unlicensed Bible-based games? Although you'll actually be surprised to hear this one is not that bad. Do you like Candyland? Who doesn't love Candyland? Well, Bible Buffet brings the Candyland experience to your 8-bit home entertainment system. The thing is, though, you spin the wheel, you move the number of spaces through all the different food-themed lands, and for each space you land on, you play through a top-down Zelda-style action section, which is actually really fun. You get to drop bombs and, you know, blow up walls, defeat enemies, collect pickups. It's actually pretty fun, and then the fact that you're not going to land on the same spaces every single time actually gives the game quite a bit of replayability. Of course, also if you're playing with up to 4 players, so Bible Buffet, I think, definitely deserves a look if you're into Zelda-style games and board games. This is a perfect kind of mash of them together. Sometimes you'll get quizzes which pop up on the screen. However, the questions were included in a booklet that came with the game when it was brand new, and there's probably not too many of those books still flying around out there. So it just comes down to a guess, which is also kind of fun. So instead of, you know, you have your Bible thumping friend next to you who's getting everything right, it kind of evens the playing field a little bit. But Bible Buffet, again, for that Zelda playing style, plus, you know, it's fun as just like a board game and multiplayer. It's cool as well. I can't fault Bible Buffet. It's just such a weird, bizarre game and kind of fun to boot. So you may be surprised to hear it actually gets a B from me. Whoa, it's Bigfoot! I hope that you like monster trucks. This one is an all-out race across America, as many racing NES games are. Although this one, basically there's events in different cities, but you have to race in between to get to those events, but oh, it's unfortunate how shoddy this one is. The races are not great because it is always forced to show both trucks on screen at once. That gives you zero ability to pull away from your opponent and actually get a lead. Well, at the same time, it means that the opponent can never actually get a lead from you because you're always being pulled along by that bottom of the screen. It is just such a broken race. There's some weapons you can pick up along the way. Sometimes you go over jumps and you'll land in the scenery, which will cause you to explode momentarily, but then you instantly respawn. Just not very good. And the events as well, they're overly complicated, make you shift gears and do all this weird stuff. Just let me race and have fun. Why does that have to be so weird? Maybe, if you're into monster trucks, this game will make more sense to you. But for me, unfortunately, a very forgettable and unneeded addition to the NES library. Definitely going into the D pile again. Hopefully we get some variety soon. We're kind of building up, these two guys, but I think we'll see some better games in the future. So yeah, monster trucks, Bigfoot. Again, if that's your thing, give it a shot, but otherwise, probably an NES game you can pass on. Bignose the Caveman. We went a while without seeing any of these weird Camerica carts. Now they're all just kind of being dumped on us at once. This one coming in gold, however, looks very snazzy. The first thing you're definitely going to notice after seeing the gameplay of this game is that it kind of reminiscent of Adventure Island. And I enjoyed the Adventure Island game, so I'm not going to argue about kind of a bootleg, unlicensed version of that. In fact, Bignose is even nicer to play than Adventure Island in some ways. You get a lot of projectiles in this game. You pick up rocks, which you can throw up to 3 of at once, which creates a really nice kind of blockade in front of you. You collect bones, which can then be used at stores, which sometimes after a level, you'll automatically be taken to the stores, although sometimes you can also find stores hidden within the levels as well, and you can buy extra lives from those, various power-ups. There's spells as well, which you can use whenever you find convenient to freeze enemies or defeat enemies, which is really nice. There's lots of different level themes in this game, from the sky to the islands. You even actually, at the end of each island that you finish, spin your club in the air so fast that you fly over the water. And you get like a shmup section before landing on the next island, of which there's several before you beat the game. I had a lot of fun with Bignose. And again, as kind of like an unlicensed take on Adventure Island, I actually enjoyed this more than Adventure Island 1. It was a pretty fun game once you dive into it. Of course, there's no continues in typical Codemaster style, so it might take you a few tries to get to the end of it, but definitely don't discount Bignose just because he's a weird, unlicensed game. It's actually pretty decent, even better than the original Adventure Island in my mind. Definitely kind of on par with the second one, so I'm going to rank that as a B. Every good game deserves a sequel, so here's Bignose Freaks Out. So one thing I really liked about it, again, the Bignose the Caveman, another good thing about it was the music. Very nice soundtrack, as many Codemasters games have, except again for B-52, where they for some reason decided to not put music during the levels, but you'll love the soundtrack to Bignose if you check that one out. Bignose Freaks Out was the last gold cart, Camerica game released for the NES, and thus one of the more rare and sought after ones. So is it better than the sequel though? Of course, though, as we saw, the Adventure Island games kept getting better as they went on. Will that also be the case for Bignose? Well, maybe it would have been if this game was anything like the first one. For some reason in the first Bignose, they ripped off Adventure Island, which fair enough, kind of makes sense. This caveman guy on an island seems a lot like Adventure Island. But no, Bignose Freaks Out. What game did they rip off? Sonic the Hedgehog. He now has a wheel strapped to his feet at all times, and he goes off ramps, up and down hills that look just like out of Sonic the Hedgehog. There is, of course, that 8-bit Sonic Pirate on the NES, which you may or may not be familiar with. However, this is like a whole other league of just someone trying to rip off Sonic and putting it on the console, and it works in some ways. Like the physics and the controls actually feel pretty good. I actually get kind of a Sonic vibe from this, and the level design as well. Sonic the Hedgehog levels are very vertical, along with being horizontal. There's upper paths and lower paths, and Bignose Freaks Out tries to replicate that, which I give it a lot of credit for. Even his jump, even when he's in the air, he does a spin just like Sonic. Like, why didn't they just put Sonic the Hedgehog in at this point? It's an unlicensed game. I doubt, they were already going the illegal route. Just go all in at that point. But yeah, they really kind of tried to make a Sonic-style game. Mushrooms that you bounce off of. One really frustrating thing though is that, once again, you have those rocks that you can throw like in the first game. However, when you press the fire button, he will throw the rocks in whatever direction he is facing as he spins in the air. So like obviously something you want to do quite often in video games is jump and shoot. It's like the whole, theme of Mega Man. Imagine if every time Mega Man jumped he spun in the air like this. But if you're in the air and you press B, he'll throw the rock like up sometimes, or maybe even behind you depending on where he is facing in that spin, and that makes platforming and dealing with enemies at the same time almost impossible. It's absolutely horrible. So that was kind of a questionable decision. Plus another decision that's very questionable is no music during the levels again. Like again, Bignose the Caveman had a very nice soundtrack while you're playing it, but not Bignose Freaks Out. Get rid of that good music while you're playing. So I got a lot of questionable decisions made when it came to the sequel of a game that I thought was pretty good. I'm like, okay, if this keeps getting better like the Adventure Island series did, we're in for a treat with the next Bignose game. But unfortunately, a little bit of a step back with this one, I think. As cool as it is to see a game that's kind of like Sonic on the NES, there's some room for improvement there for sure. So it gets a C. Bill and Ted's Excellent Video Game Adventure, another LJN movie game. And what's this one like? Well, did you like Mario's Time Machine, being a side scroller where you gotta find items, take them to the right time period and deliver them to kind of proceed? Well, hope you like doing that in a really awkward top-down, except it's like everything's on 45-degree angles adventure. And again, you're going through different time periods. You have to dial into the phone booth which time period you want to go to. And then you have to play this weird mini game where like you travel through the circuits of time and then get to the end, and then finally you're in the time period you're supposed to be in. But you have to find items in that time period, take them to a person in like another time period. But how do you find these items? You just have to jump on top of random objects. Standing on anything but the path that the level are made up out of cause you to fall onto your butt and otherwise not be able to move. And the game forces you to just jump around onto all of these arbitrary objects until it tells you, you found this item or you found this other item. Sometimes there'll be characters around that will give you hints in that regard, but it's just way too tedious, way too cryptic, and just unfortunately not that fun at all. This is another game that I had to take notes and draw a map for, similar to Back to the Future Part 2 and 3. So look at LJN, crappy movie games are the ones that make me do the most work and actually have to get the graph paper out. But yeah, this one is a slog. The music loops are like really short. It will play music for like 15 seconds and it'll just cut out and you're listening to silence again the whole time. So, I can excuse a not so fun game if it at least gives you something good to listen to while you're suffering through it. But once again, silence is golden, I guess, in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but it also gets a D, so there's that. Ugh, and I think that one even had a re-release recently on Limited Run Games. They, for some reason, re-released the NES version of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, so I hope that all of you who bought that are having a fun time with that one. Oh, it's weird. Like, I want to like it, I really do, but as it is, D for that. Bill Elliott's NASCAR Challenge. It's a Konami game. Whoa, these are always great. Well, this one is so-so. In terms of being a game to replicate that NASCAR feel, I have to admit, it does a pretty good job of it. It does kind of feel like you're in the driver's seat of a NASCAR, racing those big races to the best extent they could do on the NES. The oval tracks I enjoyed. I thought they were pretty decent. You really get to customize your car, do what you want to it, adjust all sorts of things, qualify, and then, you can feel the speed in this game. I have to appreciate that. It definitely feels like a high-speed racing game to the best extent they could do on the NES. Where it's painful is the road courses. Like, it's ridiculous. The second race you face in the championship is like the most complicated, so many turns road course. So good luck maneuvering that. The NASCAR is definitely not made for that sort of situation, and you'll be spinning out all over the place. In fact, when I was a kid, I used to just play this game, and I thought it was funny when the car spun out, it gets like towed away. Bill Elliott steals back your NASCAR license. But otherwise, again, I have to appreciate this game for actually being a pretty fun first-person racer on the NES. Definitely gets that NASCAR vibe. Just beware of those road courses, and otherwise, can play through that championship. It's probably gonna take you a few tries. At least you get a password, so you can kind of, do the best you can, write down that password, and just keep trying again until you get the results that you're looking for. But again, I like it as a racing game. I think it's cool. If you like NASCAR, you'll probably enjoy it. But I think right down the middle, a rare C for a Konami game. Bionic Commando. This one is really, really fun. Probably a well-known NES game. Sure, many of you have heard of it. When I first played this game many, many years ago, did not like it because of one key thing. You cannot jump. All of your vertical maneuverability in this game comes from a hook that you can fire to either the sides, up, or to the diagonals, and if you shoot upward to those diagonals and hit a ceiling, you can either ascend or swing on that ceiling across platforms, and it's very intuitive, a very, very well-made game that uses this claw system in all sorts of interesting ways. I really enjoy it as I appreciate it now, but yeah, back then, it's like, I want to jump. But again, it's really, really fun checking it out today. This game gives strong Mega Man 1 vibes. The soundtrack, the graphics, even though I'm pretty sure I looked it up and it's not the same person who did the soundtrack for Mega Man 1 and Bionic Commando, but probably just Capcom's sound department. Had like a course or something they all took and it all came out similar. Another thing I didn't like is that you die in one hit, although as you pick up these things on the ground that look like bullets, those are actually like experience points, and as you collect more, you get more health to your bar. And you aren't just, a one-hit wonder. You do kind of get a health bar later on in the game, which is nice. So you travel around this map, clearing the different areas, collecting different items along the way, which help you clear later areas. So it almost has kind of a Metroidvania feel to it in a sense, although in general, if you do the areas in order, there's not too much of a mystery to it. Sometimes you'll even run into trucks along the way, and then the game really turns into that original Commando arcade top-down shooter style, which is a lot of fun as well. So there's lots to love in Bionic Commando. Again, even the soundtrack, again, I compare it to Mega Man 1's soundtrack. How can you not love that? Mega Man games always have good music. So again, if you can get by the fact that you can't jump, which is kind of, if you play a lot of platformers, it is kind of a thing that takes a little bit of adjustment to get used to. And not having a health bar in the start. It's a really fun game. I highly recommend checking out. And yeah, Bionic Commando, one of the best NES games I have played. I think we're gonna give it an A, just for being so cool. The Black Bass on the NES. I know you were all just waiting for a fishing game to show up. One of only 2 games that were localized on the NES. There was a few more over there in Japan. Unfortunately though, maybe if you're really into fishing, you'll find some enjoyment in this game, but otherwise it's just very, very, very basic. Like 90% of the game is just menus, and then occasionally you'll be out there on the water fishing, even the boat. Like you don't even really get to drive the boat around. It's just a little marker on the map. You can kind of decide where to put it, and maybe there'll be some bass there, and maybe there won't. Then you'll cast your line out on this completely solid looking water, not visually appealing to look at in the slightest. And then just pray and cross your fingers that you've assembled your line and your bait correctly and that maybe something will bite. Reel in that fish, and then depending on how heavy your bass is, you'll either place in the tournament and get to move on to the next one, or be forced to suffer through the previous tournament again. Eventually you want to win that final tournament, and that's it! The Black Bass is complete. Again, unfortunately, just a very, very basic game. There's not much to it. Again, everything is very kind of dull and subdued, and I've been fishing before, and I'll admit it can be fun. If you enjoy fishing, maybe you'll have some fun with this game. But fishing's supposed to be vibrant and relaxing. I mean, I guess you can fall asleep while playing this game. I could imagine that. But yeah, unfortunately, as fun as it could be with some improvements, the Black Bass falls short. But get this! In Japan, this was released as the Black Bass 2, localized here as the Black Bass 1. I haven't even looked at what the original Black Bass on the Famicom looks like. If this is how the second one looks. Like the first one was maybe just all menus, no graphics whatsoever. But yeah, Black Bass unfortunately falls short. Again, maybe if you're really into fishing, you'll enjoy that one a little bit. But for me, I'm gonna have to pass on that one. Blackjack from American Video Entertainment, and that's all it is it's a screen where you set up the stats that you want on Blackjack, and then you play some Blackjack, and you can set the limit for where you want the house limit, so that when you bust the house, and if you reach that, I guess that's essentially, you beat the game, play it again. It's got all the essential Blackjack features like hitting and holding and splitting sometimes, and also buying insurance if it looks like the dealer might have 21. It's just Blackjack, as simple as it gets. And if you like Blackjack, maybe you don't need a really fancy game like Caesar's Palace or Vegas Stakes with all these other slot machines and stuff thrown in there. You just buy a simple Blackjack cartridge and enjoy Blackjack to your heart's content. So like as easy as it would be to give this game like an E for just like having zero content in there aside from Blackjack, which is like one of the most basic card games you can have. You know, if you like Blackjack, this game is Blackjack. It does it well. Like C maybe for Blackjack. It's Blackjack. It's not bad Blackjack. It's not particularly amazing Blackjack. It's Blackjack. Blades of Steel, another game from Konami, this one being one of their various sports games, and Blades of Steel being their hockey game. This one is a lot of fun, and most importantly for me is it's very fast-paced. There's nothing worse than a slow-paced slog of a sports game, but Blades of Steel really keeps you interested. Of course, hockey being the old sport of Canada land, I can give this my official seal of approval if you're looking for a fun hockey game on the NES. One thing that probably makes it stand out in many people's minds is the combat system. You know, you can get into fights with players sometimes and just beat them up, and whoever wins gets the puck. No penalties, so go all out. No need to hold back. And otherwise, yeah, it's just a fun, fast-paced hockey game that has great controls. You can pass, you can shoot, everything you want from hockey. Although my favorite part is definitely during the intermission when you get to play Gradius on the Jumbotron. Like, how can you beat that? Konami advertising their other games inside this game? How could they? But you know what? Again, Blades of Steel, really fun. If you're looking for a fun hockey game, either just to play on your own or with your friends, you can't go wrong with Blades of Steel, so it gets a B. Blaster Master, no doubt some people out there who probably have this as one of their favorite NES games. Kind of a Metroidvania style game. You're in a tank, although sometimes you could jump out and explore just as your dude before jumping back into that tank again. In North America, the story goes that some guy's frog jumps down a hole and he chases after him down this hole and finds a tank, and the rest is history. While in Japan, this game takes place in space and you're battling it out on another planet. So why they had to change that in North America? I don't know if they just thought we had something against space or what, but apparently we're saving this guy's frog. You go through 8 different areas, collecting different power-ups along the way. I found it to be a lot of fun, although not without its flaws. The tank can be a little bit tough to control at times, and I think the part that kinda interrupted play the most was when you have to get out and explore and go inside these different cave-like dungeons, where your weapon is just really, really weak. However, you can pick up weapon power-ups which improve your shot, make it better. It can't even go through walls until you're really high level in terms of your weapon. But the problem is that every single time you take a hit, your weapon level decreases again until you find more weapon power-ups, which aren't really that common. All throughout these areas that you're exploring, there are many different caves to go into, although only one has the boss, which you need to defeat to pick up something which will then allow you to proceed on to the next area. So a whole massive chunk of time spent playing this game is just going to be getting out, going into different caves, getting all the way to the end of it, finding that it's a dead end. Maybe there will be some health or a weapon pickup at the end of that, but by the time you get back out to your tank, you're probably going to take hits, which will remove those weapon power-ups and decrease the health that you picked up anyway, just kind of making it feel pointless to get out and explore. I wish it felt more rewarding in this game to explore areas that aren't necessarily required, but are there. Instead, the way you're going to play this game is that once you know exactly where you're going, the rest of the map just becomes completely irrelevant. You'll never travel there again. You might find like 1 or 2 places where it's convenient to farm for weapon power-ups, but aside from that, just so much of the game is like unneeded. Where it makes the game world feel big, I suppose. But I just wish there was more reward. It felt more rewarding to go into all these different caves that are just around, but you know that they're not going to be the one with the boss in it. So why would you ever go in there and just risk taking hits and decreasing your weapon power-ups? So Sunsoft, if there's one thing, we talked about this with the Batman games as well, they just can't seem to get right, it's weapons. And that unfortunately once again shines through in Blaster Master, where if they handle your weapons a little bit better, I think that's, the experience with Blaster Master might be a little bit better, might be a little bit more fast-paced, not as much of a slog, but in terms of being just a fun Metroidvania game, some of the areas are really fun, while others, again, are a little bit slower. I enjoyed Blaster Master, not in like the highest regard as some other people may, but to the point where I think it definitely deserves a B. And also, talking about like the soundtrack, we all know the Blaster Master Area 1 soundtrack, very good. Some soundtracks better than others, Area 6 personally being my favorite. which you may not have even heard if you haven't made it that far. I definitely recommend checking that one out. But yeah, Blaster Master, definitely worth the play. Once you can like hover, that's another point where it's kind of picks it up a little bit. But I'm just rambling now, so check out Blaster Master. Gets a B from me. Alright, so here we have another fishing game. It's like, I know I said that there was 2 of them. Who would have thought that they were like this far apart from each other on the shelf? Once again, by a hot B, the same company who made the Black Bass just a couple of years later. So it's like, alright, just get ready to put it on top of the D pile right now, along with Black Bass. Or so I would say. If this was not one of my favorite NES games, and I am not even kidding. Compare it to the Black Bass. In this game, you actually get to drive the boat around and see the fish in the water, which is super fun. And not only that, there are different places where you can go to fish, sometimes with bridges. There's like airplanes and cars driving around. Like, they're just so visually nice. And when you drag your lure through those fish, it's not just, alright, reel it in like in the Black Bass. You enter a fishing battle where all of your fishing ability, your wits, your smarts, your strength will come into play to reel this fish in. And sometimes throughout, there'll be problems that your boat encounters or the line encounters, and you have to solve puzzles to figure that out. All the while upgrading your levels, improving along the way, so it almost has like an RPG component to it as well. All on a quest to catch the Blue Marlin, the heaviest one that you can. And when you get into that battle, it's jumping everywhere, trying to send the line through the motor. And you gotta figure all that out. It's intense. I loved this game. It is so good. Play it. It's like the perfect summer game. Pretend it's summer. Maybe you're watching this in the summer. Play it right now. Fantastic music. Great gameplay. Again, it has like that RPG leveling system to it. So even if you're not catching like marlins, you're catching other fish. It's still improving your levels. It's just a lot of fun. Even just driving around in the boat and exploring. Compare that to that crappy menu you had in the Black Bass, again, just a couple of years before this one. I have no idea how they improved so much in just a couple of years, but the Blue Marlin, okay. I never in my life thought I would get so excited about a fishing game. I had so much fun with the Blue Marlin, and you will probably try it out and be like, this is the stupidest game I've ever played. It was great. I really, really had fun with it. So even if like you're not a big fishing person, like again, I've gone fishing. Fishing's fine. It's not like my favorite thing in the world to do, but I would play the Blue Marlin any day, all day, every day, anywhere. It was great. Easily an A for me. For a fishing game! Never would have imagined it before I played it, especially after the Black Bass. But I'm not kidding when I say it was a lot of fun. Oh boy, look what game it is. After that one, which I held in such high regard, here we have the Blues Brothers. And if you've been keeping up with my channel, you know I made a whole Nintedium video about this one, and it's crazy controls, way too much speed, janky level design, just all around shenanigans, nonsense, nothing like the movie, which I always say a game doesn't have to be exactly like the movie, but again, you have all that source material, like what the heck is this? These levels are so generic, you could have placed any character in them and you wouldn't even know the difference. It's such a shame, what this game is. And it's made by Titus, who of course would go on to make Superman 64, so that should tell you a lot. But if you really want to know a lot more about Blues Brothers, check out that whole review. I've even went back and watched that video recently. Really happy with how that one turned out. But just a very janky, not that well made game, unfortunately, that's just so generic again. Like, why even call it the Blues Brothers? It could have been literally anything. This one goes in the D pile. Bo Jackson Baseball! You thought you were done with baseball games after the last part where we looked at like 10 of them, but not yet! Still got one more to go, this time named after Bo Jackson. This one is a fine baseball game, kind of middle of the ground. One of the most kind of standout things here is the way that batting and pitching works. You get this menu that comes up, and you select right from the beginning if you want it to be like a fastball or a slow ball or how you want to swing, and then from there it just kind of sets, where in other baseball games maybe you'll hold A for a little bit to kind of get one type of swing, or you'll hold it down a lot to get another one, or hold up or hold down right as the ball comes. But this time it's like you decide ahead of time how you want to hit or how you want to pitch. And not only that, but when you're batting, it shows the pitcher on the mound, and then you from behind. While when you're pitching, it doesn't show you, but it shows the batter and the catcher. So it's a rare game where it actually switches between two different viewpoints depending on if you're pitching or batting, where mini games will kind of just pick one of those and kind of stick with one throughout. When you're batting, the pitcher still looks so big, despite the fact he is supposed to be, further away from you. So it can be kind of hard to understand distance and perspective, I found, when you're batting in this game, just because it feels like, again, the pitcher should not be that big if he's actually, so far away from you. So maybe there was some, perspective and visual issues they could have worked out with this game, but otherwise, it's a baseball game. No massive campaign to play through. You can do like a tournament that consists of having to win 3 games or something to beat it, but again, not too much content here, just your average baseball game. But if that's all you're looking for, it's just kind of a baseball game to play either by yourself or with friends, it gets the job done. So it goes down the middle of the road as a C. Bomberman, in his original game on Nintendo's 8-bit console, definitely has all the things in there that would become staples of the series as time went on. You got the kind of grid that's laid out where you place bombs, blow up those enemies, blow up the bricks until you find items behind them, or you find the door, which once all the enemies are defeated will take you to the next level. The problem with this game, the biggest problem I have with this game, is definitely the fact that it's a huge slog when you first get into it. The first level, you are so slow. Your bombs travel hardly anywhere. You can only drop one at a time. The explosion radius is like so tiny, but the level is so wide. So good luck having enough time to even finish this. It's like it's the first level and you're going to be strapped for time, especially if you don't find the door quickly. You're going to be blowing up so many of the bricks. You can very easily die of a timeout on level 1. The fun of this game definitely comes as you play it and you pick up more power-ups, because this was a thing in early Bomberman games for whatever reason, where each level only has one single power-up in it. Like the first level might have the bomb power-up. Okay, so now you can place 2 bombs, but they still hardly go anywhere. Then the next level will have the fire power-up. So okay, now I can place 2 bombs that explode a little bit better. And then of course there's other items like the detonator, so you can choose when the bombs detonate, or the shoes, which kind of increase your speed. So you definitely become more powerful as the game goes on, which is nice, but in the beginning, whoa, is it a slog. So that can be a bit of a hurdle to get over if you're just looking to kind of pick Bomberman off the shelf and play it casually. Thankfully, it does have passwords, but it's not that long of a game. I believe it was 40 stages. I think I was expecting 50. So when it ended after 40, I was like, what? And it has a really surprising ending as well. You're never going to expect the twist that happens at the end of NES Bomberman. But yeah, it has all the things in this game that that we know today as Bomberman staples, of course, in their more primitive form, but there was a lot of room for improvement that they would have built on as the years go on. But otherwise, the same graphics in every level, the same music except for like the bonus stages, but otherwise, yeah, it's just classic Bomberman gameplay. Not even the multiplayer mode though, so be ready for that one-player action. It's about as basic as it gets. It's fun once you get into it a little bit, and again, become more powerful. Just kind of got to get over those initial stage hurdles. But yeah, I think it's a reasonable C in my mind. But that takes us to Bomberman 2. Yeah, there was actually a sequel on the NES. I don't think many people really talk about this one. It is a rarer and later release on the NES, and it improves over the original game in absolutely every single way. There's even a story this time. Bomberman just walking by the bank and some guy robs it, and Bomberman gets blamed, so he goes to jail. And the first level is actually just Bomberman breaking out of jail. But you'll notice right away that this time they do not start out with every level being super wide. They actually start with smaller levels that can fit on just one screen to kind of ease you into it as you get more power-ups, become more powerful. And then they introduce the wider levels, which makes so much more sense. So already shows that they were learning. Not to mention the nicer graphics. Oh, this game looks really, really nice. The music in each of the stages is different. Like the jail stages will have a theme, then you get to go to like a forest and all sorts of different places. Just really nice graphics and different locales, and it adds a lot of variety to the game. Just again, an improvement over the single player campaign of the original in every way. Not to mention that Bomberman 2 actually introduces a multiplayer mode, so now you can duke it out with a friend. The classic Bomberman multiplayer. You really can't have a Bomberman game without multiplayer. So that's where this was introduced in the second one. So if you want to play 2-player 8-bit Bomberman, you have to pick up the sequel, which is totally worth it. This game is really, really fun. I recommend it completely. There's no reason to really play the first one if you can grab the second one. Again, the problem being just how kind of rare and hard to find the second one is. So the only question in my mind is it A or B? Because man, is it cool. It's not the longest game though, the single player campaign, not the longest, but you know, you get that multiplayer in there. Oh, it's really tough one. Let's kind of give it a half. No, it's definitely gonna fall and end up on the floor. Check it out. Let me know down in the comments below if you think Bomberman 2 deserves an A or a B. But in this case, again, you know, for being one of the rarer and more expensive games on the NES, a lot of the times, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a great game. But Bomberman 2, I had a lot of fun with. Great music, great graphics, great gameplay. If everything's great, I guess it's got to be an A. Speaking of rare and expensive games on the NES, here we go with Bonk's Adventure. Whoa, it's that guy from TurboGrafx in Nintendo 8-bit form. That's crazy talk. No, he goes around bonking people with his head and that's it. It's like, you know, you hit everything with your head, either from below or from the side or from the top. This guy's just bonking everyone. I know to all the European people watching this video, that's a hilarious phrase. It's a fun game though. The levels can be kinda linear. There's not too many like split paths or anything like that. The most you'll find is a flower sometimes, which will take you to a bonus area where you're either jumping or climbing or spinning your way through the air. Otherwise, Bonk can be a little bit slow paced and not the most difficult game. I didn't have any trouble knocking this game off in about an hour, which again, if you're paying the premium price that this goes for, definitely don't expect it to take more than, you know, an hour or two to get through. So consider that before you drop that wallet. Even graphically, this game is kind of basic. There's a lot of solid colors, not too much in terms of background. It's visually okay. Like, if you're gonna play Bonk's Adventure, definitely play the TurboGrafx version and, you know, all the sequels that came out for that as well. The NES version is nice. You know, back in the day, I could imagine that if you didn't have a TurboGrafx and you wanted to play a Bonk game, the NES one was like the one to go with. But these days, this is purely a collector's item in my mind, and definitely not the go-to Bonk game if you're looking to get into the series. Still fun though. Definitely not a horribly offensive game. Not even a bad game. Wait, no, sorry. I'm putting this in the wrong pile. To all you who I just like horrified by putting that in the C pile. No, it gets a B for sure. Not like perfect NES game, but a fun one to play through. Boulder Dash is a puzzle game for the NES where you go through caves to find diamonds, which once you collect enough of them, unlock an exit which you can use to escape and proceed on to another level. There's 5 islands to go through, each one with a different theme, and you can play through the 4 levels on them in any order that you like. As long as you can beat all 4 of them without getting a game over, you can move on to the next one and get a password. The weird kind of aspect of this game comes from the fact that it plays where you can move in 4 directions, up, down, left, or right, but the boulders and objects on screen act as if it's a side-scrolling game where, like, if you dig out the dirt from beneath a rock, it'll fall. But, like, you can move up, down, left, and right. So aren't I looking at this from, like, top down? Or, like, it's very bizarre, understanding just the perspective that you're dealing with in this game. But otherwise, that's it. You're collecting those crystals, not getting crushed by those rocks, avoiding enemies. The weirdest part is that you can also be crushed by the diamonds. Like, okay, so you dig out the dirt from beneath a diamond. If it falls on you, you die. Like, I feel like they should have rethought the fact that a collectible can kill you. But otherwise, if you're in the puzzle games, you might have some fun trying to puzzle this one out. It looks decent enough, the music's not too bad. And again, the gameplay is like so-so. I feel like there's areas where they could have improved things a little bit, especially with like the diamonds, the collectibles killing you every now and then. So I'll give this one a C. Breakthru on the NES, you're driving this vehicle which can shoot and jump, and you gotta shoot and jump your way through each of the 5 stages, which then just loop around forever in typical arcade game fashion. This one is like every enemy just sprays bullets at you, and if you take 1 hit, you're done. But the nice part is that there are checkpoints all over the place, and you can die as many times as you want. Even if you continue, you start right at the last checkpoint that you reach. So this game is very, very forgiving. And another part is that, again, you're going to be jumping over enemies, jumping over obstacles, but there's no way of knowing when there's a gap, say, coming up in front of you. So you can just jump over something thinking, okay, I'm going to dodge this by jumping over it, and then land immediately into a hole because you didn't know it was going to be right behind that enemy. So there's a lot of memorization in this game, just understanding the level layouts, how you should best deal with each part, and then putting that all together. But again, with infinite lives, you have that opportunity to really play it as much as you want, learn those levels, and then deal with them accordingly. So it's a fun game. Again, because it's not tedious and making you start at the beginning every single time, I think that adds to the experience a little bit. And again, you know, check it out if Breakthru looks like it's something for you. I think it lands right down the middle at a C. Bobble, another NES game that people no doubt are familiar with. This one can be fun. Of course, you're shooting bubbles, defeating those enemies, and once you defeat them all, you have to move on to the next stage, which there's a lot of in Bobble. There's like 100 in all, and plus a secret set of stages as well if you do a certain thing at the end of the game. I have a love-hate relationship with this game. Like, I really want to enjoy it more than I feel like I do, but there's just something about the mechanic of having to encase enemies in bubbles and then go up to them and defeat them that it doesn't really mesh that well with me. I am a fan of games where you have a projectile weapon, you take those enemies down, and when you hit them, they're dead, gone, don't gotta worry about them. Think about like the ice flower in New Super Mario Bros. Wii. It was never my favorite because instead of just fire, which can like destroy everything in your path, well now I got this ice block I gotta go up and deal with. Like, why can't I just destroy him with the fire? And of course, you know, the ice flower was good for certain enemies that maybe the fire flower wasn't gone. But in like a case like this game, I'm not a fan of the system of I gotta shoot these guys with the bubble and then I gotta go over there and then defeat them. I'd rather just have a projectile that actually took all the enemies out at once. And again, you know, different people will feel differently about that. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who probably love Bobble the way that it is. And I think that's great. This is definitely a game where playing the multiplayer, 2-player simultaneous play, is probably much more fun than just doing it single player like I did. So I will give it that. If someday I play through like the whole thing with another person, maybe it will completely change my mind about Bobble. This game also loves tight confined spaces when I feel like the controls don't really meld well with tight confined spaces. They're not responsive enough and quick enough for what it requires you to do sometimes, I feel. Or maybe I just need to get good, right? Someone needs to show me the way of Bobble, perhaps. But I found with a lot of Taito arcade to NES conversions, they are lacking in a few areas. And I guess Bobble maybe holds true for me in that regard as well. So I'm gonna, unfortunately, do the extremely controversial thing and give it a C. But again, you know, please feel free to let me know down below your thoughts on Bobble and whether you've played it through single player. And that's another thing too, is that I feel like a lot of people's opinions might be from playing it like a little bit. Like, okay, you've played it, you're up to like level 20 or something, that's fine. It's when you have to push through 100 levels that you really kind of start to feel it drags and you'll feel all those kind of weird things. So if you've played through the whole thing, I'd love to hear if your opinion, you know, differs or resonates with what I've said here. But yeah, Bobble, gonna get a C from me. So Bobble is another NES game that received a sequel later on in the NES's life, which is now unfortunately rarer and more sought after. And there's kind of an asterisk there, because if you know about a game that comes much later in the NES library that's also kind of a sequel to Bobble, I don't even know how that happened, but this is Bobble Part 2, and it improves in some of the areas where the first one lacked. Like, at least now, something I didn't mention about the first one is that the music also really got on my mind after all of the levels. Where Bobble 2, now you have different worlds and different stage themes and different music to go along with each of them, which is really, really nice. The controls are a little more fast-paced, improved here. And just, it's a much cleaner and more enjoyable game, I feel, overall. Still has those tight spaces which just do not feel nice to deal with in Bobble. I think that one thing which could make this game better is if like you held down and pressed A, if you could jump through the floor, but so many times I feel like I'm just getting stuck inside walls, or stuck in places where I can't even shoot bubbles because they don't travel through walls. And it's like the game mechanics are not made for tight confined spaces, but it keeps forcing you into tight confined spaces. But again, maybe it's just I suck at Bobble or something. You're free to share your opinions on that down in the comments below. But this game includes things like more bosses, again, and more level themes, more enemies, more variety, and I think that's just kind of what the first Bobble needed, maybe, was more variety. If you like a little more story, a little more graphics, a little more music, a little better gameplay, Bobble 2 delivers in that regard. However, this game does not have simultaneous multiplayer, which is like a huge part of the first one. Instead, it has alternative multiplayer, so I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking there, but basically, both of these reviews come from someone who has beat them as single-player adventures. So I'd love to hear what people think in regards to multiplayer and single-player. But yeah, as a single-player adventure, Bobble 2, definitely an improvement over the first one. Still some room for improvement for sure, but I think it gets a B from me. I'm gonna have to start holding the games with this hand now, as this stack has got really high. You almost can't kind of see me anymore. But we're entering the final stretch here. Bucky O'Hare, another game that starts with B. I was not familiar with this show at all, like a Saturday morning cartoon that got an NES game based off of it. But wow, is it a fun game. It's another Konami one. We looked at a few Konami games today, a licensed game from Konami, usually more familiar with those from Capcom, I feel, but this time Konami got their hands on it, and it is kind of a Mega Man style adventure. Pick your level, beat that level, rescue a guy. You can now play as that guy who has different abilities from Bucky O'Hare, but that's what you got, and it's just really, really fun. Soundtrack, phenomenal, as you'd expect from a Konami game. The gameplay, really solid. Again, just kind of feels like that Mega Man style gameplay, where you can pick up power-ups along the way that increase your health bar, increase your power bar, different things of that nature. Lots of variety in the level design, which all looks really, really beautiful. And you can definitely see the inspiration from Mega Man here and there, but also Bucky O'Hare is very much its own game. And I think all those elements combined are going to make it for a really, really fun adventure that you'll enjoy. But again, Bucky O'Hare, perhaps you're like me, never heard of it before. Why would I play a game about some rabbit or something? Of course, there's Bugs Bunny, but this is another rabbit. No, check out Bucky O'Hare. I cannot recommend it enough. Really, really cool game that I'm sure you're going to enjoy right into the end, and you'll be listening to the soundtrack for like hours and hours and hours, even afterwards. It is an easy A from me. Speaking of rabbits, here's that other guy. Bugs Bunny's Birthday Blowout likely needs no introduction. However, I feel like the introduction many of you have probably had to this game is not entirely fair. Bugs Bunny's Birthday Blowout is a very fun platformer. Not perfect, but definitely not the worst that the NES has to offer. Graphically, very nice. Audibly, I think the music is very good. Gameplay-wise, it has some flaws, like Bugs Bunny's hammer attack, for example. The appearance of the hammer makes it seem as though enemies need to be very close to you before you attack them. When you come to realize, though, that you actually want to attack just a little bit before enemies get too close to you, and that's how you can best deal with them. But otherwise, there's lots of items around to pick up, lots of fun platforming challenges. The game is not that hard, so if you're looking for an easier platforming challenge, I mean, I say that, if the earlier worlds aren't too difficult, it does actually pick up a little bit in the end. But there's lots of opportunity to pick up extra lives in level end mini games, and I just found Bugs Bunny's Birthday Blowout to actually be quite enjoyable when you can put past the fact that there's a lot of jokes to be made here, as have been made by certain YouTubers. And of course it's made by Kemco, who I usually associate more with like the point-and-click adventures, Uninvited, Shadowgate, Deja Vu, and such. But of course they made some other games on the console as well, even platformers such as Bugs Bunny's Birthday Blowout. Again, don't let what you've heard about it kind of deter you from trying it out. It's a pretty fun platformer, and I think it deserves a B. And here's another Bugs Bunny game, although this one completely different from the previous one, this one being more of a puzzle game. Bugs Bunny's Crazy Castle. You're inside a castle, you go up and down stairs, inside doors, which also have stairs that lead you either up or down, collect all the carrots on the stage, and move on to the next one while also avoiding enemies along the way. Drop things on top of their heads, or pick up that boxing glove and throw it directly at them. It's fun, although in terms of NES puzzle games, not one that I was particularly fond of over others. It was just kind of a game to play and, repetitive in a sense. But if you're into puzzle games and you like Bugs Bunny, then you can check that one out. It's had a whole ton of sequels on a whole ton of different consoles. But in terms of the NES one, not bad, but not my favorite NES game either, so it gets a C. Bump and Jump. Your girlfriend's been kidnapped, so it's your job to drive through 16 different stages, destroying everything in your path to rescue her. And I really enjoyed this game, despite the fact at the time it was one of the most difficult NES games that I had played. You have to go through all 16 of those stages without a single continue, and it's tough when there's lots of opportunity to be destroyed. I do like, though, that unlike most games where you're driving a vehicle, the point in this one is not to avoid touching other vehicles, but actually to push them off the road and to destroy them by shoving them into the scenery. You can also press A to do a massive jump and land on top of your enemies to destroy them that way as well. Of course, you're also going to have to be jumping over various obstacles as you proceed. Unlike Breakthru, which we looked at, where it feels like you can jump and then unfairly just kind of have a hole come up that you land in. Bump and Jump's very fair. having an exclamation mark at the top of the screen so you know a hole's coming up, so you don't jump too early and accidentally land in it. Overall, just the different variety of levels, the gameplay mechanics themselves, just bumping into all the different cars. Like, how many other games do you play where that's not only acceptable, but like encouraged? It's just a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed Bump and Jump despite its quite high difficulty. Definitely check it out if you ever get the chance, and it's an easy letter B from me. Burai Fighter is a not very often talked about shoot 'em up on the NES. I'm always surprised that this game is not more sought after and, you know, renowned than it is, but it's very fun. One thing I like about this game is you can shoot in 8 directions. You can face whatever direction that you like, but once you start shooting, it will kind of stay in that direction until you let go. Also, there are some very confined spaces that you must pass through. Although, unlike a game like Gradius or Life Force, you can actually touch the walls, which is like, thank you. And how many shoot 'em ups can you actually touch the walls without getting destroyed? I greatly appreciate that here. Unfortunately, it's on the shorter side, but there are 3 difficulties, and to get the best end, you have to beat it on the most difficult difficulty. And yeah, some good music, good gameplay. There's even some levels that play from like a top-down perspective where you have to explore and find the boss. That's fun as well. Nothing against Burai Fighter. I thought it was a fun shoot 'em up. Definitely one I think deserves a little bit more attention, and we're gonna give that the B treatment, making the stack even taller. But before things start toppling over, we're at our final game of the day, and that is Burger Time on the NES. Of course, a conversion of the classic arcade game. You're running around, dropping those pieces of the burger down to the bottom of the screen to make a complete hamburger, and who does not want that? All the while being chased by who knows what, trying to stop you in your path. I guess they just don't like hamburgers or something like that. You have a very limited amount of salt which you can throw at your enemies to stop them, prevent them from hitting you, but otherwise it's all about dodging, and if you cause a piece of the burger to drop while an enemy is standing on it, it will actually drop further than just one level down, which it drops otherwise if there's no enemies there. Definitely a pretty crazy game. There's multiple levels, so it's not like just the same level over and over again. You cycle through a few different ones, and they generally get more difficult as they go on. I feel like the NES version of the game has a lot of control quirks. Like, you try to climb up a ladder and you'll just freeze, like if you're not pixely perfect, you know, aligned with it, or sometimes you're climbing it and you'll still freeze for whatever reason. Maybe it was just, maybe my cartridge is faulty or something, but I don't know. I had a lot of trouble with this game at times, just getting it to do exactly what I wanted it to do. I'm sure it's probably a case where the original arcade version is the one you want to check out if you're going to be playing Burger Time, but if the NES version is all you have, it gets the job done, but you probably want to check out the original arcade one just in case. So this is like a C or a D, maybe just to even out the rows, although maybe there'll be people who are like really mad if Burger Time doesn't get at least a D. And I say that as, yeah, no E's today. Or, you know, at least a C, and no E's today. Which, you know, it's good. You know, a lot of NES games can be rough, but they're not horrible. Bad Street Brawler level horrible. So we'll give Burger Time a C. Although maybe kind of like a half and half. But that's it for another NES ranking video. We finally got all the games that start with the letter B done. I hope that you enjoyed that, kind of getting buried off to the side here. Thank you all for your patience for this video. Hope that it was worth the wait, and hope you found some games here that you want to check out for yourself. So with that said, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Please post down in the comments below what you thought about some of these rankings and what you think about these games overall. I hope to see you next time for something different. So thanks, and take care, everybody.